Do not come to Christmas dinner until you apologize to my stepdad. I stared at my phone, reading my daughter's message again and again, hoping the words would somehow change. But they did not. The screen showed the same sentence that had turned what should have been a joyful holiday season into one of the most painful moments of my life. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I am 68 years old. For most of my life, I believed that family was the one place where a person would always belong. I believed that no matter how complicated life became, the love between a mother and daughter could overcome anything. But 3 days before Christmas, I found myself sitting alone in my kitchen, wondering how I had gone from being the person my daughter trusted most to someone she did not even want at the family table. I looked at the Christmas decorations around my home and remembered all the years when holidays meant laughter, shared meals, and traditions we created together. I remembered Rachel as a little girl running through the house, excited to help decorate the tree. I remembered the years when she would call me whenever she needed advice, whenever life felt uncertain, or whenever she simply wanted to talk. Being her mother was never something I considered a responsibility. It was a gift. After my husband passed away, I dedicated even more of my life to making sure Rachel always felt supported. I wanted her to know that losing one parent did not mean losing her sense of security. I worked hard, saved carefully, and tried to be the person she could always count on. I never expected perfection from my daughter. I never expected her to agree with every choice I made. All I ever wanted was to know that the bond we shared still mattered. That was why her message hurt so deeply. It was not just about missing a Christmas dinner. It was about feeling like I had been removed from a place where I thought I belonged. The part one could not understand was the apology she demanded. She wanted me to apologize to her stepdad, Thomas Bennett. But I did not know what I was supposed to apologize for. I had always treated Thomas with kindness. When Rachel married him, I made an effort to welcome him into our family. I knew how important he was in her life, and I respected that. I had never wanted to compete for my daughter's attention. I only wanted everyone to feel like family. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Small disagreements became bigger misunderstandings. Conversations became shorter. I started feeling like my opinions were no longer welcome. Still, I stayed quiet because I did not want conflict. Mothers often do that. We tell ourselves that keeping peace is more important than explaining how we feel. We convince ourselves that silence is a form of love. But that night, holding my phone in my hand, I realized something I had avoided for too long. Silence does not always protect a relationship. Sometimes it allows people to misunderstand you. I thought about calling Rachel immediately. I wanted to ask her why she felt this way. I wanted to explain my side. I wanted to remind her of all the years we had shared. But something stopped me. For the first time, I wondered if I had spent so many years trying to protect my daughter's feelings that I had forgotten to protect my own. I placed my phone on the table and looked out the window at the quiet street covered in fresh snow. Christmas was only 3 days away. Families everywhere were preparing for celebrations, laughter, and moments together. But my daughter had made it clear that I was not welcome unless I accepted blame for something I did not understand. I did not know what would happen next. I did not know if Rachel would ever see my perspective. But I knew one thing. I would not beg for a place at a table where my love was questioned. I would not create an argument. I would not respond with anger. Instead, I would quietly make a decision that I should have made years earlier. I would finally listen to my own heart and remember that I deserved respect too. After I placed my phone on the kitchen table that evening, I expected the sadness to come all at once. I expected tears, anger, or the overwhelming feeling that everything I had built with my daughter was falling apart. Instead, what I felt was something quieter. I felt a deep need to understand how we had reached that moment. I did not want to blame Rachel. She was my daughter, and no matter how hurt I felt, that love was still there. But I also could not ignore the reality that something between us had changed. The next morning, I sat down with a cup of coffee and opened the old photo albums that I kept in the cabinet near my living room. I found pictures of Rachel during every stage of her life. There were photographs from her first day of school, family vacations, birthdays, and the small, everyday moments that meant so much to me. Looking through those memories reminded me that our relationship had not always been complicated. There was a time when Rachel and I understood each other without needing many words. She knew I would always be there for her, and I knew she would always want me by her side. That was why her message felt so unexpected. It was not simply a disagreement. It felt like a door had suddenly closed between us. I kept thinking about Thomas and the apology Rachel wanted from me. I tried to remember a moment when I had been unfair to him or said something that could have caused this situation. But the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I had always tried to respect his place in Rachel's life. When he became part of our family, I welcomed him. I knew Rachel deserved happiness, and I wanted her to have a supportive partner. I never wanted to create tension between them. Still, I knew there had to be a reason Rachel believed I had done something wrong. People do not usually send messages like that without feeling strongly about something. So instead of reacting emotionally, I decided to look deeper. I called my sister, Linda, who had always been someone I trusted. I did not call to complain or make Rachel look bad. I simply needed another perspective. Sometimes when we are hurt, we cannot see the entire picture clearly. Linda listened carefully as I explained what happened. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said something that made me stop and think. "Eleanor, are you sure you are the only person who is expected to apologize?" Her question stayed with me. I had spent so many years trying to keep peace that I had never considered whether the responsibility for peace was being placed on me alone. I realized I had become the person everyone expected to understand, forgive, and move forward. But who was asking if I felt understood? That afternoon, Rachel sent another message. She asked if I had decided whether I would apologize to Thomas before Christmas. I looked at the screen for a long time before responding. The old version of me would have immediately written a long explanation. I would have apologized just to end the conflict. I would have convinced myself that protecting the relationship was more important than protecting my own feelings. But I was beginning to understand something important. An apology should come from honesty, not pressure. I finally replied with calm words. I told Rachel that I loved her, that I wanted peace in our family, and that I was willing to have a conversation. But I also told her that I could not apologize for something I did not understand. After sending the message, I felt nervous. Part of me wondered if I had made things worse. But another part of me felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I had expressed my feelings without immediately putting them aside. Christmas was still approaching. The family gathering was only a few days away. I still did not know if Rachel would understand my decision. I still did not know what Thomas had told her or why she believed I was the one who needed to make things right. But I knew I could no longer continue living as the person who always stayed silent just to keep everyone else comfortable. This time, I needed to find the truth, even if the truth changed everything. The days before Christmas felt different from any holiday season I had experienced before. Usually, my home would be filled with the excitement of preparation. I would plan meals, organize decorations, and think about the little details that made the holiday special for the people I loved. But that year, everything felt uncertain. I was not worried about the Christmas dinner itself. I was thinking about something much deeper. I was thinking about how a mother and daughter could go from sharing everything to barely understanding each other. As I sat quietly in my living room, I began looking back at the years before Thomas became part of our family. I remembered how much Rachel had changed after losing her father. She was young, and I knew she needed stability. I tried to be both a source of comfort and a reminder that life could still be filled with happiness. I never wanted her to feel like she had to choose between moving forward and remembering the past. When Rachel met Thomas, I was happy for her. I saw how much she valued his support, and I wanted to welcome him into our family. I made an effort to build a respectful relationship with him because I knew that loving my daughter also meant respecting the people she chose to have in her life. But over time, I noticed small moments that made me uncomfortable. They were not dramatic moments. They were simple things that most people might ignore. Conversations where my opinion was quickly dismissed. Decisions where I was informed after everything had already been decided. Moments when I felt like I was being treated more like a distant relative than a mother. I told myself not to overreact. I reminded myself that Rachel was an adult with her own life. I believed a good mother knew when to step back. But stepping back slowly became disappearing, and I did not realize how much that affected me until that Christmas message arrived. I decided to meet with Linda again because I needed someone who knew my history. She reminded me of something I had forgotten. "Eleanor, you have spent years proving that you love your family. Maybe now it is time to see if they understand how much you have given." Her words stayed with me. I did not want recognition for every sacrifice I had made. I did not keep a list of everything I had done for Rachel. A mother's love does not work that way, but I did want to know that my feelings mattered. That afternoon, I received a call from Rachel. My heart immediately tightened when I saw her name on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. I wanted to listen before speaking. When she greeted me, her voice sounded tired. Not angry like before, but uncertain. She asked if I had thought about her message. I told her I had. Then I asked her a simple question. Rachel, can you please tell me what happened? I want to understand. There was a pause. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she explained that Thomas felt hurt by something I had said during our last family gathering. She told me he believed I had questioned his role in the family. I listened carefully because I did not want to dismiss her feelings. But as she explained, I realized something important. The situation was not about what I intended. It was about how my words had been interpreted. I told Rachel that if I had said something that made Thomas feel unappreciated, I was willing to discuss it. But I also needed her to understand that I never meant to disrespect him. I had spent years trying to include him, not exclude him. Rachel became quiet again. I could tell she was thinking. For the first time, our conversation was not about demands. It was about trying to understand each other. Before we ended the call, Rachel said something that surprised me. Mom, I think there is more going on here than I realized. Those words did not fix everything. They did not erase the pain of the previous days. But they opened a small door. A door that had been closed for too long. After the call ended, I looked at the Christmas tree standing in the corner of my living room. I still did not know what the next few days would bring. I did not know if our family gathering would happen the way we planned. But for the first time since receiving that painful message, I felt a small sense of hope. Sometimes healing does not begin with an apology. Sometimes it begins with someone finally asking the right question. After my conversation with Rachel, I spent the evening thinking about her final words. I think there is more going on here than I realized. For the first time in days, I felt like my daughter was looking beyond the surface. She was no longer simply asking me to accept blame. She was starting to question whether she had understood the entire situation. That small change gave me hope, but I also knew hope had to be balanced with patience. Years of distance could not disappear because of one conversation. Trust was rebuilt through actions, not just words. The next morning, I received a message from Rachel asking if we could meet before Christmas. She wanted to talk in person. I agreed because I believed important conversations deserved more than a phone call or a text message. When we met at a quiet coffee shop near my home, I noticed that Rachel seemed nervous. She was not the confident woman who had sent me that painful message days earlier. She looked like someone who was carrying questions she had never asked before. We sat across from each other, and for a moment, neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, Rachel spoke. She told me that after our phone call, she had talked with Thomas again. She asked him to explain exactly what happened during our last family gathering. She said she wanted to understand both sides instead of making a decision based on one person's feelings. I appreciated that. Not because I wanted Thomas to be wrong, but because I wanted fairness. Family relationships cannot survive when only one person's perspective matters. Rachel explained that Thomas believed I had made comments that suggested I did not fully accept him as part of the family. Hearing that was difficult because it was the opposite of what I had tried to do. I had always made an effort to include him. I had welcomed him into our traditions and respected the relationship he had with my daughter. But Rachel also admitted something important. She said that when Thomas expressed feeling hurt, she immediately defended him without asking me what I meant. She had assumed that protecting one relationship required creating distance from another. I listened quietly because I knew something about being protective. Mothers do it every day. We defend the people we love because we do not want them to feel alone. But sometimes, in trying to protect one person, we accidentally hurt another. I told Rachel that I understood why she wanted to support Thomas. That was not the part that hurt me. What hurt was feeling like my voice no longer mattered. I told her that I would have gladly had a conversation with Thomas if he felt misunderstood. I would have listened. I would have explained myself. But being told not to come to Christmas felt like a decision had already been made without me. Rachel looked down at the table. She admitted that she had not considered how that message would make me feel. She said she had been focused on defending Thomas and keeping peace in her own home. She had not realized that she was asking me to carry all the responsibility for fixing the situation. That moment was emotional for both of us, but it was also honest. For years, we had both avoided difficult conversations in different ways. I stayed quiet to prevent conflict. Rachel reacted quickly because she wanted to protect the people around her. Neither of us had truly stopped to listen. Before we left, Rachel reached across the table and held my hand. She told me she was sorry that she had made me feel unwanted. She said she did not want Christmas to become a memory of a family divided by misunderstanding. I appreciated her apology, but I also told her something important. Rachel, I do not need you to choose between me and Thomas. I need you to understand that I am your mother, and I deserve the same respect you give everyone else. She nodded quietly. I could tell those words meant something to her. When I returned home that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in days. The situation was not completely solved. There were still conversations we needed to have. There were still feelings that needed time. But something had changed. My daughter was no longer asking me to prove that I belonged. She was finally trying to understand why I felt I had been pushed away. And sometimes, that first step toward healing is simply knowing that someone is willing to listen. After meeting with Rachel, I felt a sense of relief that I had not experienced in a long time. The situation was still complicated, but for the first time, I believed my daughter and I were standing on the same side. We were no longer trying to prove who was right. We were finally trying to understand each other. That difference changed everything. The days leading up to Christmas continued, and I noticed small changes in the way Rachel communicated with me. She called more often. She asked questions instead of making assumptions. She seemed to be trying to rebuild the connection we once had. I appreciated those efforts, but I also knew that trust was something we had to rebuild carefully. Years of feeling unheard could not disappear overnight. One evening, Rachel invited me to her home to talk with both her and Thomas. At first, I was uncertain. I did not want another conversation where I felt like I had to defend myself. But Rachel assured me that this time was different. She said she wanted everyone to have the opportunity to speak honestly. When I arrived, Thomas greeted me politely. He looked uncomfortable, and I could tell this conversation was not easy for him either. We sat together in the living room, the same place where many family conversations had happened over the years. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Thomas began. He apologized for allowing the situation to become so distant between us. He admitted that he had felt hurt by some comments I made during our previous gathering, but he also acknowledged that he should have spoken to me directly instead of letting the misunderstanding grow. I listened carefully. I did not want an apology simply because Rachel asked for one. I wanted honesty, and that was what I heard from him. I told Thomas that I was sorry he felt disrespected. That had never been my intention. I explained that when Rachel chose him as her partner, I wanted to welcome him, not compete with him. I wanted our family to grow, not become divided. Thomas nodded and said he understood that now. He admitted that sometimes people interpret words through their own emotions, and he realized he had assumed the worst instead of asking what I meant. Hearing that was important because it showed me that he was willing to look at his own actions too. The conversation was not about finding someone to blame. It was about recognizing how quickly misunderstandings can create distance between people who care about each other. Rachel sat quietly for much of the conversation. I could see that she was processing everything. Finally, she spoke. She said she realized she had made a mistake by treating the situation like she had to choose one person over another. She said she should have encouraged a conversation from the beginning instead of immediately asking me to apologize. Her words meant a lot because they showed maturity. I told her that every family makes mistakes. What matters is whether people are willing to learn from them. I did not expect my daughter to be perfect. I never had. I only wanted her to remember that I was a person with feelings, not just someone who was always expected to forgive and move forward. After our conversation, we began preparing for Christmas differently. There was still some awkwardness, but there was also a sense of honesty that had been missing before. We were no longer pretending everything was fine. We were creating a new foundation based on communication and respect. On Christmas morning, I arrived at Rachel's home not because I had been invited out of obligation, but because I felt welcomed again. That difference meant everything to me. As I walked through the door and saw my daughter smile, I realized something important. The greatest gift was never the holiday meal or the celebration itself. The greatest gift was knowing that after a painful misunderstanding, a family could still find its way back to each other. But I also carried another lesson with me. Love is strongest when it includes respect. A person should never have to lose their voice just to keep a family together. The Christmas morning I spent with Rachel and Thomas was different from any holiday I could remember. It was not perfect, and honestly, I did not expect it to be. After everything that had happened, I knew that rebuilding trust would take time. But there was something peaceful about sitting at the same table again and knowing that everyone there had chosen to be honest. For the first time in many months, I did not feel like I had to measure every word I spoke. I did not feel like I was walking carefully to avoid creating a problem. I could simply be myself. As we shared breakfast, I watched Rachel interact with Thomas, and I noticed something important. Their relationship had not been damaged by our conversation. In fact, it seemed stronger because they had learned how to communicate better. That gave me comfort because I never wanted my presence to create tension between them. A mother does not want to replace anyone in her child's life. She simply wants to know that she still has a place in it. Later that afternoon, Rachel and I sat together near the Christmas tree while Thomas spent time preparing dessert in the kitchen. She looked at me and said something I had been waiting to hear for a long time. "Mom, I want you to know that I understand now." I smiled and asked what she meant. She explained that before everything happened, she believed family meant protecting the people closest to you from uncomfortable situations. But she realized that real family also means having difficult conversations and listening when someone says they are hurt. Her words touched me because that was exactly what I had wanted her to understand. I never needed her to choose my side. I only wanted her to see my side. Rachel told me that she had spent a lot of time thinking about how quickly she had believed that I was the problem. She admitted that because Thomas was important to her, she reacted emotionally instead of asking questions. She said she was sorry for making me feel like I had to prove my love for the family. I held her hand and told her something I had learned through the entire experience. "Rachel, love should never be something you have to prove by accepting everything silently." She nodded. I could tell those words would stay with her. That conversation changed something between us. Not because it erased the difficult days before Christmas, but because we finally understood each other better. In the past, I had believed that being a good mother meant always being available, always forgiving, and always making things easier for everyone else. But I realized that a healthy relationship requires both people to care about each other's feelings. After Christmas, Rachel and I started creating new traditions together. We began meeting for lunch once a month. Sometimes we talked about serious things, and sometimes we simply laughed about everyday moments. Those ordinary conversations became some of the most valuable parts of our relationship. I learned that rebuilding a family connection does not always happen through one dramatic moment. Sometimes it happens through small choices made consistently over time. I also noticed a change in myself. Before this experience, I had spent so much energy worrying about whether others were comfortable that I rarely asked myself if I was comfortable. I started taking better care of my own happiness. I spent more time with friends, returned to hobbies I had neglected, and allowed myself to enjoy life without feeling guilty. Rachel noticed those changes too. One day, she told me she was proud of me for choosing myself while still keeping my heart open to our family. That meant more than she probably realized. For years, I thought protecting my daughter meant making sure she never experienced disappointment. But now I understood that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is teaching through example. I wanted Rachel to see that kindness and self-respect can exist together. I wanted her to know that forgiveness does not mean forgetting your value. Looking back, I still remember the pain of receiving that message before Christmas. I still remember how alone I felt sitting in my kitchen that night. But I no longer see that moment only as a painful memory. I see it as the moment when our relationship began changing into something stronger. Because sometimes the moments that break our hearts are also the moments that teach us how to rebuild them. Months after that difficult Christmas, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed between Rachel and me. The most surprising part was not that our relationship had improved. It was that we had both learned how to love each other differently. Before everything happened, I believed a strong family was one where people avoided conflict. I thought keeping everyone happy was the same as creating peace. But I discovered that real peace does not come from ignoring problems. It comes from having the courage to face them with kindness and honesty. Rachel and I were still mother and daughter, but we were no longer trapped in old patterns. She no longer assumed I would always understand without being heard. And I no longer felt that I had to remain silent just to protect the people I loved. One spring afternoon, Rachel invited me to her home for a small family gathering. It was not a holiday or a special event. It was simply a chance for everyone to spend time together. That made it even more meaningful because there was no pressure to create a perfect moment. We were just together. As I watched Rachel prepare dinner, I noticed how much she had changed. She asked for my opinion, listened carefully, and included me in the conversation. Those small actions meant more to me than any grand apology ever could. Respect is often shown through simple things that people do every day. During dinner, Thomas brought up something that surprised me. He said he had been thinking about the situation for a long time and wanted to share something with me. He admitted that he had allowed his own feelings to influence how he viewed certain conversations. He said he should have taken the time to understand my intentions instead of assuming the worst. I appreciated his honesty because I knew admitting mistakes was not easy. I told him that I also learned from the experience. I learned that even when we mean well, our words can sometimes affect people in ways we do not expect. The important thing is being willing to listen and understand. Rachel smiled and said that was the biggest lesson for all of us. She explained that before Christmas, she thought choosing sides was the only way to support the people she loved. But she realized that families are not built by choosing one person over another. They are built by making room for everyone's feelings. Hearing that made me proud because it showed how much she had grown. I did not need my daughter to become a different person. I only wanted her to become more aware. I wanted her to understand that the people who love her also need love in return. Around that time, I started making more plans for myself. I joined a local gardening group and began spending weekends doing things I enjoyed. For years, I had focused so much on being available for my family that I forgot how important it was to have my own interests. At first, I felt a little guilty. Mothers often struggle with the idea of putting themselves first, but I realized that taking care of myself did not mean I loved my family less. In fact, it allowed me to show up with more happiness and energy. Rachel noticed the difference. She told me she loved seeing me enjoy my own life. She said that when she was younger, she thought a mother's love meant endless sacrifice. Now she understood that a mother's happiness mattered too. Those words stayed with me because they showed that our relationship had reached a new level of understanding. We were no longer connected only by history. We were connected by mutual respect. Looking back, I realized the Christmas conflict was never truly about an apology. It was about something much deeper. It was about whether my voice mattered within my own family. The answer I found was yes. My voice mattered. My feelings mattered. My presence mattered. And I hope Rachel carries that lesson with her for the rest of her life. Because family is not about never hurting each other. It is about caring enough to repair what has been hurt. As another year passed, I began to realize that the most valuable part of our family journey was not the moment when everything went wrong. It was everything we learned afterward. The Christmas conflict that once felt like a painful ending had become a turning point. It showed us where our relationship needed healing and gave us the opportunity to build something stronger. Rachel and I continued to grow closer, but we did so with a new understanding. We no longer expected each other to simply know what we were feeling. We learned to communicate before misunderstandings became bigger problems. That change may sound simple, but for us, it was one of the most important lessons we had ever learned. One afternoon, Rachel visited me at my home. We sat on the porch together, enjoying the quiet afternoon. It reminded me of the years when she was younger and would sit beside me while telling me about her dreams. For a moment, I saw the little girl I had raised and the woman she had become at the same time. I realized that both versions of Rachel were still there. She was still the daughter I loved, but she was also an adult learning how to make her own choices. During our conversation, Rachel brought up something that I did not expect. She told me that the experience before Christmas had changed the way she thought about family. She said she used to believe that keeping peace meant avoiding difficult conversations. She thought that if she could remove the source of tension, everyone would be happier. But she realized that true peace does not come from ignoring problems. It comes from respecting people enough to hear them. I told her that was a lesson I had learned too. For many years, I believed that being a good mother meant always being available and always making things easier for my family. I thought love meant putting everyone else's needs before my own. But I discovered that a person can be loving and still have boundaries. A person can forgive and still remember their worth. Rachel smiled and said that was something she admired about me now. She said that when she was younger, she saw my kindness as something endless. She assumed I would always be there no matter what happened. But now she understood that my kindness was not something to take for granted. It was something to appreciate. Those words meant more to me than she knew. Not because I wanted praise, but because I wanted understanding. I wanted my daughter to see me as a person, not only as her mother. Someone with feelings, hopes, and a life beyond the role I had spent decades fulfilling. Around that time, Thomas also became more comfortable with our relationship. We were never the closest people in the world, and I did not expect that to happen overnight. But we developed a genuine respect for each other. We could sit together during family gatherings without the tension that had once existed. We learned that relationships do not have to be perfect to be meaningful. They simply need honesty and effort from everyone involved. I also continued creating a life that brought me happiness. I traveled more, spent time with friends, and discovered new interests. I stopped feeling guilty about enjoying my own time. That was an important change for me because I realized that my identity was not limited to being a mother. I was Eleanor. I was a woman who had experienced loss, love, challenges, and growth. I was someone who still had dreams. Looking back, I understand that the message Rachel sent before Christmas changed all of us. At the time, I saw it as a rejection. I felt like my daughter was pushing me away. But with time, I realized it forced us to confront problems we had avoided for years. It encouraged conversations we needed to have. It reminded us that love without communication can become fragile. The greatest lesson I learned was not about apologies or family gatherings. It was about self-respect. I learned that standing up for yourself does not mean you stop loving others. Sometimes, it is the very thing that allows love to become healthier. And today, when I sit with my family during the holidays, I no longer worry about whether I belong. I know I do. Not because I have earned my place through years of giving, but because I am valued for who I am. Years have passed since that Christmas when I sat alone in my kitchen reading a message that changed the way I looked at my family. At the time, I believed that moment represented everything I had lost. I thought my daughter no longer saw my value. I thought the years of love, support, and memories we shared could disappear because of one painful misunderstanding. But now, when I look back, I see that moment differently. It was not the end of our relationship. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Rachel and I are closer today than we were before because we finally learned something that many families struggle to understand. Love alone is not enough. Love needs communication, respect, and the willingness to listen. For many years, I believed that being a good mother meant always being the strong one. I believed I had to accept disappointment quietly, forgive quickly, and keep everyone comfortable. I thought that was what love required. But life taught me something important. A healthy family is not built by one person constantly giving while everyone else simply receives. A healthy family is built when every person feels seen and valued. I still think about the woman I was on that December evening. She was sitting in her kitchen, looking at a message from her daughter, wondering how she had become someone who was no longer welcome at a family celebration. I wish I could go back and tell that woman something. I would tell her that her pain was real, but it would not last forever. I would tell her that sometimes difficult moments reveal the conversations we have been avoiding. I would tell her that protecting her own heart did not mean she was giving up on her family. It meant she was finally recognizing her own worth. Rachel and I now have traditions that belong only to us. We still celebrate holidays together, but we also make time for ordinary days. Sometimes the most meaningful moments are not the big celebrations. They are the simple afternoons when we sit together, drink coffee, and talk about life. Those moments remind me that family connections are built one conversation at a time. Thomas is still part of our family as well. Our relationship developed slowly, but it became stronger because we chose honesty instead of assumptions. We learned that people can misunderstand each other and still find a way forward. We do not need to pretend that difficult moments never happened. Instead, we can appreciate what those moments taught us. I have also learned to enjoy my own life beyond my role as a mother. I spend time with friends, continue gardening, and find happiness in the little things around me. I no longer feel guilty for choosing moments that bring me joy. I finally understand that caring for myself does not take anything away from the love I give my family. It makes that love healthier. When Rachel looks at me now, I no longer see uncertainty in her eyes. I see appreciation. She knows I am not just the person who helped guide her through life. I am also a person with my own feelings, dreams, and experiences. And I know she is not just the daughter who hurt me during a difficult moment. She is a person who learned, changed, and chose to rebuild our relationship. That is the beautiful thing about families. They are not defined by the moments when everything goes wrong. They are defined by what people choose to do afterward. They are defined by forgiveness, growth, and the courage to have honest conversations. The Christmas message that once broke my heart became the lesson that helped me understand myself better. I learned that love should never require you to disappear. I learned that respect is not something you have to beg for. And I learned that sometimes the strongest way to love your family is to first remember that you are worthy of love too.